Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the Land and Home Show. Today we are talking land, the economy, the market, and all things loan related and finance related with one of my favorite Kentucky people, Emily Stamper. Hey everyone, I'm Stephen J.B. Davis, your land specialist and residential realtor here in Central Kentucky and beyond. As I said, we're here with Emily Stamper, who is from Rural First. You're going to get to learn all about her, and I'm going to answer her lots of questions, mainly land related, but we're going to probably hop into some home stuff too. And I'm just really excited. Emily and I work a lot together. I'm very fond of her and her family, and just tell us, about you and how you got here and what you do exactly and what you like doing.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on the show. Super excited to be here. Been watching for a couple of years, so super neat to be here and be on camera. So like Stephen said, I'm Emily Stamper. I am a Rural First loan officer with Rural First out of Mount Sterling, Kentucky. So I service the entire state and some of the surrounding states. Rural First is part of Farm Credit MidAmerica, so many people don't really understand the difference or the split there. So Rural First, we are the consumer division of Farm Credit MidAmerica. Basically what that means is I do more of our consumer type loans, so lot loans if you're going to be building a house, recreational property, so like for hunting, camping, horseback riding, things of that nature, homes on acreage or rural homes, as well as constructions, while Farm Credit on our true ag side does more of like our farm purchases, cattle loans, other livestock loans, operating lines of credit, equipment, and investment type properties.
Now, you all know I'm a stickler for this. I want you to pay attention to what you just said. Farm loans, because owning land and owning a farm are not the same thing. So if you're looking for that recreational piece and you really want something that you probably won't build a house on, want to hunt, this is why I'm always recommending I'm always recommending Rural First, because they have great products and you really can't beat what they do and who they are and how they do it. I cannot say enough great things, so I'm gonna just rein it in. Can you tell us how you got into the land world? What's your background?
Yeah, so my background, I grew up around farming, right? I grew up in rural eastern Kentucky and out of Greenup County. That's where I was born and raised and went to school. My family farmed livestock, so we had cattle, tobacco, corn, large produce gardens, horses, a little bit of everything. So I knew at an early age I was involved in 4-H and FFA and rodeoing, showing horses, and just said, hey, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Awesome. Where I was from, people don't really farm full time, right? It's more of a side gig, or it's just passed down from family member to family member. So I knew I wasn't going to make it as a full time farmer. Nobody in my family farmed full time. So I said, what can I do for the rest of my life to provide me with a good living and let me still enjoy agriculture and be involved. So went to school at Morehead State University, studied agribusiness and animal science, so I have a dual bachelor's in that. Interned with Farm Credit in between my junior and senior year of college, and never left.
I don't think I knew that you interned with them, and I also didn't know that you were a dual major. I knew about the first major, but not the animal science major. Mm-hmm. Is that because you love horses so much?
So I initially went to school wanting to be a large animal vet.
Oh, okay.
So that was my first initial kind of hey, this is what I want to do. Quickly decided that I do not love school long enough to go to school that long. So I started talking with my advisors. I'm like, okay, what else can I do? Nobody else in my family kind of was involved in agriculture other than just farming for themselves, and learned about ag finance and pharmaceutical sales, and I love to talk to people. I love meeting new people, so I decided sales was probably a good thing for me to go into, and went into the finance side of it and haven't left.
That's really cool. I also love your take on school. It does get to be a little bit of a bore after a while.
Yes.
And getting what would that be, a doctorate of animal science.
Yeah, it would have been another 8 years on top of undergrad. So
I just had a panic attack.
4 years of undergrad has been enough.
Yeah, I don't blame you on that one, not one bit. So one of the things that I want to talk about is just the fourth quarter of 2022. It's January 4th, although I don't know if you'll be seeing this a week from now or 2 days from now. I hadn't figured out the order of these videos, but now that we have, all of the numbers more or less, like we understand trends of how quarter four went. And if you've watched previous videos, did a similar thing for home market, but we haven't talked about the land market because I needed to have the landlady with me to do that. So what are like the broad strokes of what you saw in Q4?
Yeah, so 2022 as a whole was just kind of a crazy year, right?
Yeah.
Started out crazy and it was crazy throughout. When it comes to that fourth quarter, we always, typically see a slowdown in business, right? It's coming around the holidays, people are busy, so we always expect some of a slowdown. This year I was expecting a major slowdown, right? And we didn't see that. So, there's a couple different factors that played into that, but, business remained pretty steady, pretty solid compared to, previous years. It was the norm. It wasn't anything. It didn't come to an excruciating call or anything like that, like a lot of us were kind of predicting.
Yeah.
Some things that had, I think, a big part of that is we actually saw rates drop in Q4, right? And then, they did kind of go back up a little bit, but they've held pretty steady where, Q3 we were kind of expecting like rates to hit the spike prior to the end of the year, and we didn't see that. So we ended up having more people who jumped in when the rates had taken a dip and, wanted to go ahead and cross that finish line and closing on properties before end of year.
Was there any particular highest and best use that you saw like as a clear winner for the types of loans you were servicing, or just what you were maybe seeing from data that maybe I don't have access to or anything like that?
Good question. Yeah, that's hard to say. A couple different things. So, on the land side of things, we saw a lot of people trying to wrap up those investment type or like recreational properties, right? Those rates took a dip, and a lot of those people for the last 6 months to a year have been kind of in between. Are we pulling those funds from investment in 401k accounts, or do we finance it? Right?
I see.
Do they approach it as more of a cash buyer, or is it better off to finance? And when those rates took that dip, they went ahead and took that plunge to go ahead and finance it, right? While it made sense. And then on the other side of that, constructions. So that was a big part of Q4.
Really?
People locking in those 30-year mortgage rates on constructions when they saw that dip and got to take advantage of that.
That's really interesting. I keep forgetting about the whole home building thing. I don't really work with a whole lot of. I never get to that point. It's usually like buy the land and I can hook you up with as many builders and architects, but I never really see that process through. So construction just kind of like this whimsical thing in my head. But I guess that makes sense because it was very difficult to find a great contractor. Probably since 2020, to be quite honest. They've been busy. But I guess that makes a lot of sense to me. Do you have any insight on, there was one last thing about Q4. Where people are coming from. Like, is there kind of an area of the country? I've experienced personally lots of out-of-state clients and prospective clients, but what are you seeing and where are they coming from?
Yeah, so really since COVID hit, right, we've seen a huge influx of the business that I've been doing, or the borrowers that I work with are from out of state, which is really neat. Kentucky's kind of become the melting pot. I love it. So it's been really cool to see, and it's just progressed throughout 2021 and even into 2022. I've seen more and more and more. And so not just people completely relocating from out of state, but people just wanting to invest here, right? I'm sure, as you know, our land prices here and our tax rates and things are a little bit more advantageous than some of the other states.
Yeah,
You said that a lot of people are coming from, right?
Yeah,
so you
of
can't
course.
blame them. What $3,000 an acre, $2,000 an acre here can get them, as opposed to what it can get them in another state. They get a lot more acreage for it, and a lot nicer property. So majority, I wish that I would have ran the numbers, and I would like to see the numbers for myself, but I'm going to say probably 60 or more % of my borrowers the last 3 years have been out of state. And a lot of people from California, New Jersey, Maryland. I've had a lot of Florida, Texas.
Florida, really?
Mm-hmm.
That's surprising to
Michigan,
me.
New York, New Jersey, kind of really a little bit of everywhere.
That is really, really interesting. I've anecdotally had a lot of West Coast interaction, Oregon, Washington, and California, and that has been just wild to me. Like, not in a bad way or anything. I'm just like, you're moving from where?
Yes, well, last week I actually had my first borrower who was completely relocating from Washington State to Eastern Kentucky, and I was like, what brought you here? I love Eastern Kentucky. Born and raised here. I think it's wonderful. But I'm sure Washington is very different. He's like, we just fell in love with the area and the people. We came to visit once and love the people in this area and how nice and the opportunities in homesteading. So we see a lot of
and the water. For you West Coasters, we do not do water rights the way you do water rights. That's one of the most common questions I get, but you just get to use your water how you want. We have a lot of water in this state. You can't really throw a rock or drill through a rock and not find water someplace.
Yeah.
Okay, well, moving on, do you have any insights on the ag market? Anything that you want to share from a commodities perspective for the farming crowd, or anyone that maybe is just interested in how farming might affect the greater economy? We talked about rates dropping and rising, so what's that looking like?
Yeah, so
Or did it look like?
Commodity price wise, right? Like what everybody heard, I feel like prior to COVID is those commodity prices, cattle prices are so low, they're selling so cheap at the stockyards, and that's impacting the farmer. Well, the thing right now, that we're seeing and have seen all throughout the years, commodity prices are staying high, right? So people tend to think that, these farmers and producers are getting rich off these prices. Unfortunately, that's not the case, because just like with us as consumers, when we go to the grocery store, it's costing us a whole lot of extra money than what it did 12 months ago, or even more. Well, it's the same thing for farmers. Their input costs have
Feed
obviously
costs
increased.
more,
Everything costs more.
Yep.
Their fertilizer, their feed, their seed, the hauling, to the stockyards, or bringing in
Remember
that
those gas
fertilizer.
prices?
Yeah, so, unfortunately, farmers aren't necessarily really making any extra money, even those commodity prices have stayed high and even risen throughout the year, because their input cost, inflation's having the same effect to them as it is to us, right? Yeah. So unfortunately, it's pushed some of the smaller farmers out. Those larger farmers are, of course, getting to stay in business, but it's also making people just farm a little bit smarter, right?
Sure.
Using more resources and trying to bandage equipment a little bit longer, right? Because to keep their input costs lower.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You can't necessarily buy a brand new John Deere in this economy with a good conscience.
Yes.
You might want to hold on to that liquid cash a little longer. Okay, thank you for that. And then the big question, just like with the home side of this video I did with Mitch, what do you think 2023 looks like in your crystal ball that you have?
Yes, I should bring up my crystal ball. Forgot to bring it with me today. Must have left it in the car. So I get asked that question, I don't know, I feel like 100 times a day.
Yeah.
Good question. I wish that I had a crystal ball. And I joke, and I tell people we're not worrying about the rest of the year, right? Let's live in the moment. Let's worry about today, tomorrow, maybe the end of the week.
C'est la vie.
Yeah, c'est la vie. But in all honesty, these are unprecedented times, right? So the economists who typically make projections aren't necessarily making projections, or caveating that by saying we don't really know. My personal projection, right, is I think we're going to see rates continue to rise. I don't think it's going to be as dramatically as what we saw Q2, Q3, and some of Q4 in 2022. But I do think we're going to see rates, steadily rise throughout probably all of 2023 and potentially early 2024. But at that point, most of what I've read and what I've seen is saying, we are going to see rates drop probably sometime in 2024.
Gotcha.
Do I think we're going to get into a 2008 situation? No, I don't think rates are going to hit 15%. No, I don't think it's going to be anything like that. But we're going to see a little bit higher than where we're at right now. The national average on interest rates on a 30 years at 7.44%. That is on a mortgage. And that is across the board. That's on all types of mortgages, right?
Yep.
All credit scores for 30 years. So, and that's not to say you can't get a lower interest rate than that right now,
yeah.
right? Because that is truly just a national average. And where rates are at today, everybody was like, oh my gosh, we haven't seen rates that high in 10 years. Right, we haven't in 10 years, but when you pull back the reins and look at the big scale over the last 50 years, we're still below the average interest rate.
I always remind
rates are
people,
still good. We are still in a good.
We're not in the
environment.
80s, 18%. That you want to maybe barf a little bit if you're trying to buy a new house for an 18% interest. At 6 is a far cry from 18. Are you specifically in Kentucky, outlook wise, do you think, this is kind of a farmland question, but you're a farm girl.
Yep.
So do you think that there's any big changes, or do you see at the start of any big changes coming in terms of corporate interests? And I told you I wasn't going to surprise you, but I just thought of it. And so this is just an opinion question, because one of the things that I talk with my land colleagues from Iowa, from the Corn Belt, Nebraska, all that stuff, land has been selling, good ground to grow great things. But a lot of those sales have occurred between family-owned things, and maybe they're family with a big farm, but the family's getting out of it and it's going to X corporation, whatever. Do you see any signs of that happening here? Or hear any of that from your Farm Credit counterparts or anything like that?
I mean, there's always the possibility, right? Or there's always interest of small-scale farmers selling out to larger corporations, right?
Yeah.
We don't see that a ton, especially in this market around us, because most of our farms are truly small scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not necessarily, I don't want to say big enough, but they're not large enough acreage wise.
Sure.
Most of the time for it to be in the best interest of that corporation to purchase it, because then, that's not going to be enough ground for them. So then they're going to have to try to find something else close by.
Right, to amass
right, so it doesn't
something.
necessarily make sense.
Yeah.
But, there's always that possibility. I mean, unfortunately, with the economic times that we're in, we are seeing, family farms. There are some people who are deciding like, hey, now it's a good time for us to get out or kind of pass that torch, right? With the increased appetite from borrowers to purchase those investment type properties and recreational type properties. We are seeing, what had previously been farm ground turned into those types of properties, right?
Because, so transition. Okay.
So we're seeing, I would say, more of that than the fear.
I never even thought about that.
Of corporations coming in and buying those family farms.
Okay. That is really, I'm gonna have to think about that one for the next few days. Like that thought literally never occurred to me, that a torch would pass from a lateral move just from person to person, but that the use of that property would change on that small of a scale. Like I'm gonna be up thinking about that. I really am. Like I
stumped you. That never happened.
No, that's not true.
That never happened.
I might not just tell you because I feel like I'm always rambling and taking up your time when we're on the phone. So I get stumped in private, and then thank God that I even know you. So to wrap things up, do you have a piece or pieces of advice for land buyers that would make them smarter, more prepared, et cetera, given our economic, whatever you want to call it, and then the same question for land sellers.
Okay. So this probably sounds super cheesy, right? And I know everybody's heard this saying, but I will say it till I'm blue in the face, and I say it every day. They are not making any more land, right? It is always a good time to invest in land, if you can afford it, right? If it is financially feasible for you, whether that be through taking out a loan, maybe it does make sense for you to pull out some investment, especially if you've been losing, on your 401k over the last year. If you can take those funds, pull it out and invest it into land, or, maybe you have some other real estate that you're going to sell and need something to do with that money.
1031 exchanges.
There's literally no more land being made, right? That's the best thing that I can say, right? It's always a good time to buy land and invest in that. As far as sellers, kind of the same thing. Like, you guys are at an advantage. There's no other land being made. So.
Right, and it has generally been both home and land. It's been a seller's market, largely. I mean, there's always exceptions. Someone always hops in the comments and let's tell me about that one exception. But
yes, there's exceptions to every rule.
To every single rule, but it's generally been a seller's market here in Kentucky, and that has remained strong even with the home seasonality of slowing down, and evidently not that much of a slowdown on the land side from a macro perspective. So I like that advice, though. I mean, we don't live in Dubai. We're not pushing sand into our lakes or damming things up in order to create more space for whatever you make land for. But here in Kentucky, they're not making any more, and hardly really any other place in the world.
So I mean, it's like I said, it's of course if it works for your financial position, it's always a good time to invest in land. Now, unfortunately, not everybody can invest in land, or it's going to work with their finances. So that's why you have your local lenders or your statewide lenders, who are experts in the market and can help you decide if it is feasible for you.
Totally.
That's what we're here for.
And goodness, have you been here for me, which I so appreciate. Is there anything that you want to add before we go? Or I will certainly make sure you know how to get in touch with Emily. I mean, pretty sure if you've ever asked me about loans, she's the first person I say to get in touch with, but I'll make sure her information is down below in the description of the video. I'm sure I'll have a graphic somewhere up here so you can see during the video, but it's not this is a 10 out of 10 choice. I mean, and that's that simple. Anything else for you?
Thank you.
Well, I mean it, I do.
We make a good team.
Yeah, we do make a good team. Nothing else?
Can you think of anything else for me to ramble on about that you want me to say?
You have not rambled once. I've rambled. I don't think so.
I can't think of anything else.
All right. Well, then get in touch with us. You want to buy, you want to sell, and certainly get in touch with Emily if you are in Ohio,
Kentucky, Ohio,
Indiana, Tennessee. So this is not just a Kentucky thing. 4 states, and especially if you're
whether you live here or are buying here, right? So you don't necessarily have to be buying property here if you live here in one of our 4 key states. And then real first, we actually have about 14 states in the U.S. now that we lend in. So I just don't necessarily always handle those transactions if it's outside of my comfort zone in the areas that I know and understand the markets.
Gotcha. Well, folks, I hope this has been helpful. That's always my goal, is to help you and occasionally entertain you. We've got a lot of exciting things for 2023, but with that, I thank you again and say farewell.